Megan Fox.
Yeah, Megan Fox has the story.
Megan Fox.
Megan Fox.
Megan Fox writes at PJ Media.
Eat Tucker.
That was your last.
Damn it, man. I cried for 2 days.
Megan, thank you very much for that.
So, I can explain the bed thing.
If you don't show up and vote, up your ass. I don't care if you're in the hospital. Crawl to the stake. Crawl there.
It's like Jesus going into the temple. He's like, I got a whip. Get out! Get out! The lovely and wonderful Megan Fox. Not that one.
Not that one. Not the weird one that drinks blood in his toe thumbs.
Megan Fox.
Megan. And honestly, Megan, if you don't like it, I'm sorry.
She's the devil.
Megan.
Megan Fox.
Megan.
Megan Fox.
I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me, but I wouldn't do that.
You've never met a like me. You want to tangle? You want to go?
Holy sh!
Too much cussing on this. I guess we didn't bleep it, so we got to turn it off. But it's
Pissed off the wrong woman.
oh my God, I have been assaulted, but Megan Fox runs wild on you, brother.
She's the devil. Not for publication.
The story.
I'm Megan Fox. Thank you. Cheers.
Hey guys, hey, how are ya? I'm back. It's me, it's Megan Fox. I just realized I did not send out a notice that I was doing this on locals. Oh crap, I got to do it right now. Anyway, welcome back. We're going to get through as much as we can. Probably won't get through the whole day of the rest of the testimony and all the fighting at the end. I hate to inform you that there were two, the defense moved later in the afternoon to have a directed verdict on some of the counts. And they won at least two of those. While I was on my way to take my kids shopping, I heard some of those arguments, and they were able to throw out a few counts. So, for instance, I believe one of them had to do with Beata's estate. They had a count in there about, I guess they were alleging that the bills from the hospital may come out of Beata's estate, but it sounded like the plaintiff did not provide any evidence that the estate would be liable for any of the bills. So the judge threw that out. So that's one less count that the jury will be able to consider. I'm going for the Belle Meade bourbon today. It's a sour mash whiskey straight. What else? The other count, I'm trying to think. The other count that got thrown out was the consideration that Jack, the way the judge described it, I'm not good at this economic stuff, but the way the judge described it sounded like the count had to do with making Maya whole in case she was held responsible for the hospital bills, but there was no evidence that Maya would be responsible financially for the hospital bills. So the only one that stuck was the one for Jack. So Jack is the only one who can claim financial losses, I guess. So Maya and Beata are taken out of that. But again, there are like 21 counts, so don't panic. But those are the two. But the defense moved for a directed verdict and the judge took it under advisement. And I did not like this at all. The judge took it under advisement to possibly do a directed verdict on a couple of other counts, which I think would be devastating to the plaintiff's case. And I cannot for the life of me remember exactly what those were, but I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So we'll watch that. Oh, if I thought about it hard enough, I might remember. Let's see. It would be about the oh wait, I just forgot. I was supposed to be sending a notice on locals. Hold on. Let me do that. I can't do two things at once. I have problems. I have problems. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm only medium smart. I can only do one thing at a time. Talk amongst yourselves. Talk about dogs. Talk about daughters and coffee. And I will send this on a notice on locals so that my locals peeps know what we're doing. Share video. Copy link. I have to do this on my mobile because I'm trying a new browser. I'm trying Firefox today because that's what StreamYard said I should do, because I also noticed the playback of these streams has been so blurry. Like I'm looking at StreamYard right now and my camera looks perfect. It looks flawless. It's fine. But then I go and I look at the playback on YouTube or Rumble or whatever, and it's blurry AF. All right, I'm posting this in local so no one yells at me. Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then after this, when we are done with this, straight after this, there's going to be a locals only exclusive live stream because we're going to watch the Netflix documentary, Take Care of Maya, together. Now, if you are not a member of my locals, you need to get signed up tonight. Do it now. Use promo code Maya for a free month when you sign up monthly. Make sure you hit the monthly tab and not yearly, unless you want to subscribe yearly. And in that case, the promo code is SQUATS, and you will get a 2 months free on me. Grandma Got Moves. Thanks for the $50 super chat. That's huge. We appreciate you keeping us updated on the trial. You rock. Well, so do you. Grandma Got Moves too. I appreciate that very much. All right, let me catch up on your comments here. So yeah, directly after this, and I think I'm only going to go until 9 o'clock because 9 o'clock is the time I told everybody we would be doing movie night. So we only have an hour and 15 minutes. All right, so let's get to it. Let's get to where we left off. Allow StreamYard. Yes. What? Oh, I'm on a new browser, so this is weird. How do I know which screen it is? Screen 1? Oh, this is so different. This is so weird. No, it must be screen 2. No. That ain't it either. Hold on. Oh, now I have to give... Are you serious? I'm going to have to switch back to Chrome if it's going to do this shit to me. Firefox, turn it on. All right. Sorry, guys. All right. Uh-huh. Oh, you're kidding me. Oh, please, Lord. Let this work. Aha. There we go. Yep. Allow. Okay. All right. I had to switch over to Law and Crime stream, totally crapped out, and now only shows an hour of the trial, the last hour, for whatever reason. So I had to switch over to Fox 9. We have to remember where we were with this guy. Hold on a second. I forgot to add my volume boost. Can you guys hear it okay? Oh, no audio. All right. Well, then we're going to have to go to, I'm going to have to go back to Chrome because I can't screw around with this. Shit. All right. Not a problem. Not a problem. Not a problem. Hold on. I'm going to pop out and pop back in on a different browser. Okay. Oh, stop sharing for fuck's sake. Oh, no. All right. I got to pop out and pop back in. I'll be right back. Actually, I can probably enter on Chrome at the same time that I'm in Firefox. No problem. Think I can. Yep. There I am. All right. Hold one moment, please. And here I am. Okay. And we are now on Chrome. Locals link. You guys are asking for the locals link. It's right here. Oh, and Rumble, I'll be there in a minute to check out your comments. I haven't come over to you yet, so just hang in there. Do I stream 24 hours a day? No, but when there's trials that I am covering, they are 8 hours a day, and I'm trying to catch up on, I'm trying not to fall behind, because once I fall behind, that sucks. Because then I'll have way too many hours to do. So when there's a big trial going on, yeah, it seems like I stream all the time. But no. Okay. It says day 16. Please tell me. But again, they screwed it up. I gotta go to Fox. My trial Fox. Day 16. There it is. Law and crime thing still hasn't caught up. All right, I'm going to back this up a little bit because that was all very important testimony. This is the defense's psychologist or whoever. He was contracted with DCF, and yeah. Oh, and he lost his handwritten notes to Hurricane Fido. Remember that? Yeah, we're supposed to believe that he lost his handwritten notes, and he's the guy I think Maya accused of lying.
Or the mother has sources of emotional or mental distress. And by the way, I'm not the first person to insist that there was a link between this child's psychological pain and her physical disorder.
Should that evaluation at the onset of treatment be conducted by every doctor who becomes involved in her treatment?
Should have been by the doctors who were instituting invasive forms of chronic pain management.
Prior to the installation of a PICC line, should the doctor evaluate whether that's appropriate or this is a case of Munchausen by proxy?
That's not what I'm talking about. So this child, before ever going to All Children's Hospital, had seen that I could tell at least three, if not four, treating doctors in the community that work with chronic pain. I say the community, I make a mistake. In the Tampa community, there were 2 or 3, and then there was at least 1, if not more, doctors in Mexico. I don't know what their standard practices are, but the doctors who treated Maya for a form of chronic pain disorder and treated her with ketamine, opioids, and/or the benzodiazepines. In every case I've ever seen where a child or an adult, for that matter, was being treated for chronic pain with those medications, those doctors literally always, the cases I was involved in, always involved an assessment of psychological pain in either the child, mother, or both.
Back to the question. The doctor diagnosing CRPS should have conducted that differential diagnosis. Is that correct?
So I'm telling you that every case that I ever had, they always did that. I'm simply telling you that it appeared to be an omission in this case when this child is talking to me about her psychological pain, her perception of her mother's psychological pain, giving details about what she believed her mother's abuse in Poland and that her dad knew and all this stuff that I already testified about. And in each case, when I asked Maya, had you told these doctors this? And she would tell me, they know, according to Maya, I was the first person to ask her.
Okay.
Outside of her family, excuse me, outside of her family.
All right, Dr. Wiss, if I understand you, you don't want to make a normative statement and say what a doctor should have done. But you are willing to say that in your experience and based on what you'd seen in the past, the normal procedure was to conduct that differential diagnosis.
So I'm telling you that in every case where there was a child or an adult that was being treated for chronic pain with more invasive medicines like ketamine, opiates, benzodiazepines, that every single one of those cases I was involved with over a 40-year period always had an assessment of the child's psychological pain and or the mother's psychological pain. And in this particular case, in the records you have, I was not the first person to tell somebody that there was a dramatic link between this child's psychological pain and the triggering of intense physical pain.
Okay. The evaluation of psychological pain, that would include the doctor making the initial diagnosis. You would expect that to have occurred. Is that correct?
Maybe more than once.
Okay.
So at the point of a medical doctor going to an extreme chronic pain management remedy to assess, is there psychological pain here with the child or the mother? Are we missing anything? Because psychological pain can cause or contribute to the development of physical pain, or in the case of an actual physical pain disorder where you don't take into account the psychological pain, it can worsen it. So it's either cause or contributing, or it worsens after the fact. At a minimum, at stage one, yes, it should have been assessed. And secondly, if they see that these treatments aren't working and you're having to repeat more ketamine infusions and more opioids, and multiple doctors are doing that, then reassess. See, maybe we missed something. Maybe someone wasn't entirely honest with us.
In every case, and based on your previous experience, where a subsequent doctor became involved in the treatment, would they have also made a psychological pain evaluation?
A subsequent doctor who's giving invasive treatments like ketamine infusions. There were fewer cases that I saw where a second doctor got involved, but yes, the second doctor either did their own assessment or referred the child out or attempted to get the records from the first doctor to see how thorough was his assessment.
What are the criteria in the DSM-5 for factitious disorder imposed on another?
I didn't memorize those.
Do you have a rough outline of what those would be?
There's usually a medical condition that's alleged. I understand that sometimes there can actually be a medical condition, but it's exaggerated. And normally there is a psychological condition in the parent that was not properly taken into account that's causing the parent to either wittingly or unwittingly act this out through the care of the child.
So in diagnosing, and did you make a diagnosis of Munchausen syndrome by proxy?
No, that's a medical diagnosis. I don't make that diagnosis by myself.
I believe the phrase used was working diagnosis. Is that not a diagnosis?
No, what I felt was that in my evaluation of Maya, so I'm finding what I have found in other cases of my Munchausen by proxy, that either the child or the parent or both actually has some identifiable source.
He thinks he's so smart. He calls it von Munchausen by proxy because the dude's name that it was named after is called von Munchausen, Baron von Munchausen. Yeah, you're very smart because you read Wikipedia, sir.
Sources of psychological distress or emotional distress that's either causing or contributing to the pain to begin with, or that is triggering relapses of the pain.
Was your working diagnosis Munchausen by proxy?
So let me get this straight. You think this kid is in intense psychological pain. And so, in order to solve that intense psychological pain, you put her through more intense psychological pain by separating her from the only family she's ever known. So let's say that what this guy says is true, that there's a psychological component to Maya's pain, and that psychological trauma makes the pain worse. So they put her through more psychological pain. Does that make any fucking sense? Oh, that's it. We're being demonetized. I said the F word a few minutes in. What are we, 20 minutes in? Oh, I should be good.
It wasn't mine. It was a working diagnosis of the doctors in the case.
And your testimony is that Munchausen by proxy, if the diagnosis is made, that is a joint diagnosis of both the child and the parent?
No, by proxy means it's of the parent. But the child, in my experience, you have to look at both the child and the parent together. I want to see what is happening to this child, particularly when I knew that I was not the first person to make the determination that this child had physical pain that was absolutely triggered by specific sources of psychological distress.
Okay, let me be specific.
So let's distress her more. Let's distress her more. Let's put her through more distress. That'll work. That'll make it better. That'll make it all better. Let's put her through more psychological stress.
Yes.
Holy shit!
Is that a diagnosis of the child?
The
People are like Nazi doctors. What is this?
child is the proxy. So the child is normally experiencing some kind of reported medical condition, but I'm telling you that they also are typically experiencing some kind of psychological pain that has to be evaluated along with the evaluation of the parent.
Right. I think we all in this room understand that where Munchausen by proxy is a valid diagnosis, that would have some effect on the child. My question is
I'm saying almost.
Now that's the mistake that the plaintiff made. Don't call it valid. You should have gotten an expert to say that Munchausen syndrome by proxy is totally controversial, and it was taken out of the DSM-5. They had to come up with another name for it because it's so bullshit. So now they're calling it factitious disorder or conversion disorder, while still sort of making it have the same components. Munchausen doesn't exist in the DSM-5. So the plaintiff should never accept the premise that Munchausen is a real thing. It's not. Child abuse is a real thing. I don't even believe in this factitious disorder. That's going to come out of the DSM-5 after this year, I think. You got, I got to remind you, we have a new article that you need to clickety-click on. So, because it's not trending #1 anymore. So we're not doing our jobs, folks. It's #4, and me no likey that. I need #1. I'm coming after Matt Margolis. You guys got to help me beat Matt. Beat Matt. Clickety-click on my articles instead. Matt Margolis is my very good friend over at PJ Media, who is always #1. And whenever I beat him, he texts me. Like he's surprised. So go over there and clickety-click. There's 167 of you right there. If you could just click on that link. There's 167 of you on YouTube and 56 on Rumble. If you all click the link, I don't care if you read it, just click it. He will send me a text and go, "What are you doing? Why are you beating me?" And I love it.
Not the opposite, but that either you have a child who has psychological distress that's caused by the parent's psychological distress, and that's contributed to the child's pain, or the child's pain is exaggerated by the parent's psychological distress.
Okay. Is that a diagnosis of the child?
Diagnosing the child's psychological condition is a diagnosis of the child.
Is Munchausen syndrome by proxy a diagnosis of the child?
Of the
Nope.
adult.
It's a diagnosis of the adult.
Right.
Not the child.
Not by.
Okay, so did you diagnose the adult? This is so bullshit. I want you to pay close attention. And the article that I wrote today that I just shared in the chat talks about this. In fact, before we even finish this, hold on. Let me go over here. Let's go over to my article. Over 70 families say they lost their children to false Munchausen by proxy allegations levied by one doctor. Now, let's go down here to the video clips that I pulled. These people, they accuse you of having it, but they never diagnose you. They never diagnose you. Here's Kathy Beatty, and here's her qualifications for being a Munchausen syndrome by proxy expert.
Incident, right?
She read some articles.
Right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with me that 3 cases do not make you an expert in Munchausen by proxy?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that you have no background training and experience to provide any expertise in Munchausen by proxy?
To provide
any expertise in Munchausen by proxy?
I have a little bit of knowledge of it from the cases.
A little bit of knowledge. I have a little bit of knowledge.
I have not researched, and I'm not a.
All right. So when you gained knowledge, though, it was from physicians, I would gather, psychologists or doctors, people like that.
Sometimes, yes.
Well, did you read things about it or study anything about it? Okay. What did you read and study?
So through graduate school, I read many of articles that were written.
Oh, you read some shit?
The medical literature,
or
the social work literature.
Yeah, you for sure are qualified
name
then.
5 symptoms of Munchausen by proxy?
This is really going to piss you
the
off.
parent seeks multiple medical professionals in order to
Oh, a parent who seeks multiple doctors to find out what's wrong with their medically complicated child? Okay, that's one. Holy shit.
get diagnosis on very vague kinds of symptoms. The child may be admitted to ERs or multiple hospitals.
Oh, so if you have a sick kid,
unwilling to share information,
chronically ill,
from other providers, with current providers. The parents are demanding of certain medical treatments that seem out of place or out of line with the current medical diagnosis. The parents seem very attentive to their child.
Anything else?
the parents
for the top 5
seem attentive
I was thinking
to their child. Okay, we don't have time to watch this whole thing. Here's another one. This bitch here, she falsely accused a mother in California of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and her 15-month-old was taken away from her for over 7 years. 7 years. And this is the person who leveled the charge of Munchausen. Let's listen to her qualifications, shall we? She's a social worker.
Is it ever acceptable for you to document in my client file that I have possible Munchausen's by proxy?
If it's reported as a concern by a professional, then yes, I can document it in our case files.
What type of expert were you referring to a moment ago, ma'am?
Medical or mental health?
Medical or mental health? What kind of medical expert?
Somebody who is making a professional assessment.
So
or
an auto
like
mechanic?
a psychologist or something like that, that's making some kind of professional
What kind of
assessment the client.
professional?
If they report
A professional cheerleader?
concern for any kind of mental, medical,
Any kind
things that
of
come up
mental
through medical doctors or through
professional? A dentist? Could a dentist
mental
do
health
it?
professionals, then yes, I would document those things in my case files.
How about a licensed clinical social worker? Would that be an appropriate mental health professional to diagnose Munchausen's by proxy?
That would be a proper person to provide their professional assessment in regards to Munchausen by proxy.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that. Are you suggesting that a licensed clinical social worker has the authority to diagnose someone with Munchausen's by proxy?
That's not what I said.
That's why I'm
Yes,
not
you
clear
did.
what you said. I'm asking to clarify. Could you please clarify what you just said a moment ago?
If a licensed clinical professional indicates that there are some concerns, further assessment may be required. Who actually would be the person to diagnose, I can't specifically state. I'm not an expert in Munchausen by proxy.
Thank you. True or false? A licensed clinical social worker is unqualified to diagnose a person with Munchausen's by proxy, to your knowledge.
I don't know.
Squid pro
A
quo.
clinical
She has a
social worker.
master's degree.
Can they diagnose a person with Munchausen's by proxy?
Because I have
Believe
not,
that.
I'm not an expert in Munchausen by proxy. I can't state who would be the person that would be diagnosing them.
Okay, just if you're just joining us, this woman is not testifying in the Maya Kowalski trial. I'm just pulling up examples of people who are not qualified to diagnose Munchausen, but they accuse parents anyway, and they get the kids taken away. Do you see how this works yet? It is a crime. So if you want to go over there and read that article at some point, not right now because we're busy here right now, but click on it, save it for later, bookmark it, and go back and read it because it's really good.
Itself, that you can't do diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy without looking at the circumstances of the child.
Okay, thank you. And also the assessment of the adult.
It should.
Okay. Did your evaluation allow you to assess Beata?
I only was able to assess what Beata had reported in the records that were given to me. I was asked to do an evaluation only of the child.
Could you make a diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy without evaluating Beata?
I don't make that diagnosis no matter who I see. That's a medical diagnosis. First of all, I wouldn't have seen Beata because I'd already seen.
Have you noticed that no one will fess up to making the diagnosis of Munchausen's? They took a kid away from her for Munchausen's, but they still can't find the person who fucking diagnosed it because nobody did. All they do is they whisper and they write shit in your record. And then it just becomes like a game of telephone. And all of a sudden, you're the woman with Munchausen, even though no one has diagnosed you.
Seen the child, so there would have been a role conflict. That I saw the child, therefore I probably shouldn't also see the adult because I've already formed some opinions. But I did make recommendations based on what I saw with the child that someone needed to fully evaluate whatever the mother's psychological conditions were, and especially if she had been abused. Has she been abused?
Did
by her
anyone
father?
do that?
Did anybody ever evaluate that? Where did this child get that from? Because it was clearly disturbing the child that happened.
You mentioned you wouldn't make that diagnosis in any case. Is that correct?
I do not make the diagnosis factitious disorder by proxy. I defer that to a physician.
What type of physician?
Any doctor who feels capable of making the diagnosis.
Any doctor? Any doctor? Oh my God, a podiatrist then. Any doctor who feels capable of making the diagnosis. Really? Any doctor? Any doctor? A dermatologist? An optometrist? A chiropractor? No, I guess he said medical doctor. So what other kind of medical doctors can we think of that would have absolutely no expertise in munch? No, the only type of doctor that I could say, according to the DSM-5, that would have the ability to diagnose would be a psychiatrist, and preferably a forensic psychiatrist. Yes? An ophthalmologist. How about a bone surgeon? Could a bone surgeon, could the guy who does knee replacements, could he make the call? A radiologist? Someone with a doctorate in philosophy? Dr. Jill Biden. Dr. Jill Biden could make the diagnosis, according to this guy. My God.
And I've seen psychiatrists make the diagnosis. I've seen pediatricians make the diagnosis. I've seen neurologists make the diagnosis. I've seen doctors in multiple professions make that diagnosis.
Have any expertise in ketamine?
I'll tell you what my experience. You said any experience?
It's expertise, but we can talk about experience as well.
Okay, my experience with ketamine, I had two experiences in my professional life dealing with ketamine. One was when I was the principal investigator of the National Institute of Health grant investigating PCP and polydrug abuse. Ketamine is a chemical cousin of phencyclidine. So PCP stands for phencyclidine, piperidine, hydrochloride. Ketamine is a cousin of PCP. When I was the principal investigator of this grant and it ended up being published as a book chapter, I was seeing people who had polydrug abuse. And this is still happening to this day. Kids, teenagers, middle school, no elementary school kids that I saw, college students were abusing it. So that was part of my professional experience with ketamine. The other part was a small number of doctors were using ketamine infusions to treat CRPS or RSD, but they were mostly not using ketamine. So maybe a handful of people before this case had I seen any age a patient being seen for multiple ketamine infusions.
Okay. You had encountered the treatment of CRPS with ketamine?
A small number, maybe less than 5. Okay. And they were adults.
And based on this polydrug abuse and this other research that you did, what do you know of the withdrawal symptoms of ketamine?
Well, first of all, some of the cases that I saw were family members, would say siblings that were all abusing it, and one of the siblings had overdosed with it. They were fatal. They were fatalities. And so a group called DICAP, Drug Intervention Counseling Action Program, was referring the siblings to me. It was difficult for me to say what the withdrawal was because none of them were single substance abusers. They were using other things too, PCP, cocaine, marijuana, alcohol.
In what capacity were you brought in here?
In what capacity? I'm a consultant to the child protection team. I was asked to see Maya at the hospital, and I defined my role as administering, scoring, and interpreting various tests with her, doing a clinical interview, and if I heard or saw evidence of trauma with her, I interviewed her about any traumas that she experienced, and then write a report and send it back to the child protection team. That was my function.
You work for Suncoast, is that correct?
I'm a consultant for Suncoast. I see 12 kids a year. I have an agreement that I will see 12 children a year through the child protection team.
Okay. Suncoast, is it fair to say, is a contracted lead agency?
Not the way you're using it. So there's community-based care organizations. There's 18 of those in Florida. Those are Department of Children and Families subcontracted agencies. That's DCF. The child protection teams are under the Department of Health. As far as I know, I'm not privy to this, but as far as I know, Suncoast has a contract with the Department of Health to provide a child protection team. As far as I know, Suncoast has numerous other programs as well, but that's only one. They do mental health therapy, they do sex abuse treatment programs, education of the community. So they have multiple functions.
All right, how long did this evaluation last?
I was with Maya somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 hours.
Right. You also said referred by Dr. Sally Smith. In what way were you referred by Dr. Sally Smith?
Because the child protection team normally will refer a case to me either on their own or Dr. Smith directs them to contact me to see the child.
Okay. On how many previous occasions prior to this 2016 evaluation had Dr. Smith directed the child protection team to involve you?
Okay, so I have been doing child protection team CPT evaluations since the fall of 2013, so not quite 6 years. And my agreement with them is that I'll do 12 a year. So what's that work out to? 12 times 670 or so. And more likely than not, They were ones that Dr. Smith recommended they call me. Sometimes there's a nurse practitioner on the team that will say, you should get Dr. Lewis involved in this one, or the child protection team is involved with the child protection investigator, and the CPI will say, hey, we need to get Dr. Lewis involved. So I really can't give you a number. I'm not 100% sure how many were just from the CPT through the nurse or from the child protection investigative office suggesting they get me involved, or Dr. Smith.
In the last paragraph on page 1 of your report, you mentioned the very problematic dissociative anesthetic ketamine. Are those your words, or does that description of ketamine come from the intake reports?
My words.
And please describe what you mean by very problematic dissociative anesthetic.
What I described to you earlier, my experience with ketamine and reading about it and having kids overdose on it and doctors being reluctant to use it.
And so again, that would be the risk of overdose, correct?
Psychological dependence.
But it doesn't refer to any specific withdrawal effects.
No.
Okay. On the second page of your report, the first full paragraph on that page mentions that the all children's staff and CPT medical director Smith developed significant concerns that Maya has been the witting or unwitting subject of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Who are you referring to specifically on the all children's staff?
That was just my interpretation of reading the records.
Okay, so you don't know who specifically within the hospital had those
No.
concerns? Okay. And you said that Maya has been the witting or unwitting subject of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. What would it mean for Maya to be a witting subject of Munchausen syndrome by proxy?
That the mother was doing it wittingly and not unwittingly.
Oh, so that's a description of the mother's.
Right.
Okay. Not mother's state of mind, not Maya's state of mind.
Right.
Okay. The third paragraph, further anecdotal reports indicate that the parents were able to convince at least one hospital to treat Maya with morphine. These anecdotal reports, do you know the source of those?
The records that I was submitted.
The intake reports?
Yes.
You're not aware specifically who provided those reports?
No.
The last sentence of the third paragraph, these medications are known in the neuropsychological literature as causing or contributing to significant neurodevelopmental difficulties if misused or if used instead of far less invasive, restrictive treatments. Were you aware that the ketamine was prescribed by Maya's treatment physicians?
Just from what I read in the record.
Understood. Your understanding of the case is that Maya experienced a period of distress and then that brought a flare up of CRPS. Is that right?
You asked me where I got that
No,
particular.
I'm asking where you got it. I'm just trying to understand if I heard you correctly.
Well, the second part of my comment was that I was not the first person in the case to definitively say this child had psychological circumstances that caused extreme relapse and severe pain.
Who was the source of that comment that you recall?
Your client's wife.
Okay. You're referring to Beata Kowalski.
Yes. So if you go to 015, and it says the mother reported that 4 weeks ago is when the last relapse began. She believes the trigger was when hospital homebound program denied the child services. The mother stated this was taking away the child's line to reality to classmates and teachers. The denial of homeschooling caused the child to have an emotional depression. She experienced distress, which led to a flare-up of pain. Okay, so I was making two statements there. The mom was informing the child, you can't get this hospital homebound program anymore. And the mom is then noting in her belief system.
That's Beata's fault? The school denied her. And that's Beata's fault? And not to mention, we heard from the experts in CRPS that stress does trigger the pain. And why does it matter if the pain is physical or psychological? Why does it matter? It's still pain. Pain is pain.
That is what caused the child to have intense CRPS pain.
I'm sorry, did you just say that?
Can I just also mention that the way this country treats people in pain is total horseshit. It's total horseshit. If you are in pain, whether it's psychological or physical pain, you deserve pain relief. Period. Whatever pain relief that works for you, whatever it is. I don't care if it's opioids. I don't care if it's ketamine. If you're using pain medication to reduce your pain and make your life a little better, I'm not talking about getting high. I'm talking about using it for pain relief under a doctor's supervision. They should not be stingy and they should not care if you get addicted to it. Like, so what? People are addicted to caffeine. We're addicted to all kinds of shit to make us feel better. If you have chronic pain, the medical community should be helping you, should be doing what they can to help. Instead, they treat you like a drug addict and they withhold medication that helps you feel better. And I think it's horseshit. I will never forget when Rush Limbaugh was caught in that ridiculous drug scandal because he was buying Oxy on the black market. You know why he was buying it? A lot of people, this never made it to the news because The left-wing media wouldn't tell the truth. Here was the truth. He had 4 failed back surgeries. 4. If you can imagine the kind of pain that would come from not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 failed spinal surgeries, that's what he was going through. He was showing up to work every day. He was doing his job. Nobody knew that he was on oxycodone, or oxycodone, as Mr. Hunter likes to call it. Nobody knew. He was doing his job with half his brain tied behind his back. You would never have known. And yet, they treated him like a drug addict. They tried to bring charges. They dragged his name through the mud. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. So he had to give up. He had to go to rehab, get off all his pain medication, and tough it out because of our stupid laws and our tyrannical medical system. It's bullshit.
The mother delivered that information to the daughter?
I got that from talking to Maya. But even in that paragraph, schools don't send letters home to children. Whatever the notice.
So she wasn't supposed to tell her daughter that the school denied her application? And what was she supposed to tell her? Wasn't Maya going to know when school time came around and she wasn't getting schooling? Is he kidding? You have to tell your kids what's going on. He's full of bullshit.
Was that the parent received, so a parent would receive notice, your request for hospital homebound has been denied. So the parent would have to be the one informing the child that that was the case.
And so this distress that the mother describes, how does that support or cut against diagnosis of Munchausen by proxy?
So,
hey, chimp in a bow tie. Glad to see you here. Don't tell me how to run my channel. 1. And 2, you were complaining earlier about you don't like the commentary on this channel. Well, you have a YouTube channel, I guess. You could fire it up at any time and cover this trial and give the kind of commentary that you want. I don't know why you're here. You don't like the commentary and you want to tell me how to run my channel. So, yeah, that doesn't work for me. So, why are you here? Go do something else. Because I'm sick and tired of the criticism. You can go criticize somewhere else. Why don't you start your own channel and then you can do all the commentary you want the right way? Right? Right? Get the fuck out.
well, so the mom was in distress, and the mom conveys to the child, I'm upset that you can't have this program. According to the mom, the child learning of this denial of homeschooling triggers, according to the mom, this intense flare-up of CRPS that she did not have until she was informed of this information. That's why in my report I'm saying unwittingly instead of wittingly. So it may not be that the mom knew or understood and may never have had a discussion with the treating doctor. You mentioned this Dr. Kirkpatrick, may have never have had a discussion saying, you don't tell this child distressing information because it could cause her symptoms to flare up. Then we have to give her this invasive drug. So what you do is prevent that from happening. Instead of giving her a bunch of ketamine, mommy, you're
you
being
lied
counseled
to
now by
her.
the treating doctor. This child.
So you lied to her. His advice is that Beata should have lied to her daughter. Wow.
Pain we know can be triggered by information that produces psychological distress. So don't give this child psychological distressing information or let her overhear it between talking to you and your husband. Those are the cases I've had with chronic pain in the past that we advise people of that. But that would have been the treating doctor would have had done that. I don't know if he did or didn't. So either he told the mother, don't do this, and she did it anyway, or he never told her. And she would know, oh goodness, I'm making my kid's problem worse. I'm making her pain problems worse and having her go back on ketamine because I just gave her information that I was distressed by. Now the kid's distressed. And according to the mom, that was the single factor that caused this last flare up before Children's Hospital.
So as you reviewed these 20 pages ahead of October 18th, you wouldn't have had any independent knowledge that the mother was distressed other than what you read into this paragraph?
Right. And for what Maya told me, that's the most important thing. What I got directly from the child I did a pretty thorough assessment of her clinical interview and a trauma interview of what exactly was making Maya sad, upset, anxious, worried, or depressed. And she described it. She was worried about her mother. She was depressed because she knew her mother was depressed. At least she thought. She thought her mother was depressed because her mother had been abused by her own father. Maya was also traumatized by her hearing a doctor in Mexico telling the mother, Maya has a 50-50 chance of dying from these treatments. And that further traumatized the child. So that was all part of my doing an assessment of what her psychological pain was.
Does it mention that the mother was distressed?
It's an inference. The way that she reported that to the team, she believes the trigger was the hospital homebound program when the child was denied services. That's those several lines there describing mom was upset that the kid was denied services, and she was upset that then that triggered the child having a pain disturbance. What she didn't recognize, likely, is that it wasn't the fact of the kid's service being denied. It was mom telling the kid in the mom's being upset about this being denied and telling the kid, you've been denied this program. And then the kid has a major flare-up of pain. And I'm concerned that a medical doctor providing these medicines never told the mom to be very careful about not sharing any of that information with the child, much less doing it when she's upset.
The mother's distress was an inference of yours based on reading that paragraph.
Partly, and partly from knowing that Maya had told me repeatedly that she was upset because she felt that her mother was in a state of distress and her mother was depressed about multiple things.
How could the family have avoided telling Maya that she couldn't attend the hospital homebound program?
It depends on how they told her. If mom was upset when she told her, and
Oh, you're full
turns
of
out in
shit.
interviewing Maya, she was very.
Oh my God. How is she supposed to tell her? I'm adding out wrenches right now. I'm making some of you mods. But please listen. Don't censor anybody. Don't ban anybody. Don't do any of that. I only need you to get rid of porn bots and spammers and whack-a-troll. Porn bots and spammers. So if someone is spamming the channel, you can get rid of them. If it's a porn thing, get rid of it. But you know, give a wide berth to free speech here. Okay, so unless it's something that would get the channel in trouble, leave it alone. So I let everything through unless I think it's something like severely racist or you know, that kind of thing.
Sensitive, more so to her mom. She only brought her dad up a few times. She was very sensitive to when her mother was upset. So when I'm reading that, it was evident to me that this was not a calm moment. This mom is upset. These people didn't give this child something the mom believes she should have given her child. And unless the mom is counseled properly, to go off, calm down, let the child know, you're not going to get this hospital homebound program, but we're going to find some other way to teach you. And if she told her in any kind of a state of distress, this child is very sensitive to her mother's psychological state.
Dr. Kirkpatrick or Dr. Hannah should have counseled her to calm down before delivering that message.
Every kid is sensitive to their mother's psychological state. Every kid. You know, I don't cry in front of my kids very often because when I have, it starts them immediately with the tears. You know, they start crying. They don't see me cry very often because it's psychologically upsetting for them. So I try not to. T-Rex Trucking and More, thanks for the super chat. My mom has a 50-degree curvature in her back from scoliosis, failed fusion in the 90s, 2 ribs removed from surgery to clean lungs from pneumonia, and it's still extremely difficult for her to get her pain meds. See, that is ridiculous. That is absurd. That is what I'm talking about. Our pain management system in this country is a shame. It is a shame that people are living like this. Give this woman her pain meds. Ridiculous. They're just supposed to tough it out. This is the attitude that these doctors have. Just tough it out. God.
Treating doctors in this case, and again, I don't know what they did or didn't do. It's always been my experience that treating doctors would assess, does this child have psychological distress as the mother? Is part of the child's distress her perception of mom being depressed or upset, not just about her condition, about mom's depressed because she was abused by her dad. And this child, in talking to me, is very sensitive to what she thinks her mother's emotional states are. In actuality, the child's describing to me what could have been a major depression on the part of the mother that pre-existed all of this taking place.
Oh,
and that could have been identified.
Now he's diagnosing major depression of the mother through the child's statements. Do you think that that's ethical for a psychologist or a psychiatrist, wherever the fuck he is? Do you think that's on his ethics? Seems kind of shady to me. Never met her. Never met Beata. Not once. Diagnosing her with major depression through the statements of a 9-year-old, 10-year-old child.
The inception of the child's treatment.
Back to the third paragraph of your report on page 2, you mentioned far less invasive restrictive treatments. I assume those are CRPS treatments you're referencing.
Well, the less restrictive treatment are psychological remedies and psychological treatments.
Is CRPS a psychological disease?
No, but that's what we've been talking about. In cases of chronic pain, when there is a psychological disorder or psychological distress identified in the child or mother, and you treat those psychological issues, the pain management patient needs less medicine.
So treatment, psychological treatment of Maya would have lessened her pain?
Identifying what I identified at the time I identified, had that been done prior, that somebody came along and found out Maya's worried about her mother. She's worried that her mom's depressed. She's worried her mom's depressed because she was an abused child by her own biological father. Maya then is affected by her perception of her mother's upset. All of those things are contributing factors in chronic pain cases. My experience has been, and this is in the literature too, when you treat mom dad, child, the psychological issues in the family, you treat those, you identify those, and then treat those. At that point, the amount and frequency and levels of medications are far less than if you ignore it and don't even check that it's there.
All right, the first sentence on page 3 says that Maya at no time spontaneously initiates any verbal expressions of pain or cramping. Are spontaneous expressions necessary to support a CRPS diagnosis?
So what that sentence referring to, because I knew I was sitting with a child who was reported to have a chronic pain condition. And as I told you earlier, I knew that adults who have those conditions can't do like a high five. You shouldn't, they could have pain, they could hurt them. So I told Maya before I started administering any of the tests, if you have any pain, if you are uncomfortable, if you're hurting when we do any of the tests today, I need you to immediately tell me that, initiate that, tell me that. And after giving those instructions, she did not do any of those.
Okay. You go on to document and correct me if I'm wrong, an above average IQ.
In some areas.
Okay, and a processing speed deficit.
Relative deficit.
Okay, explain relative deficit, please.
Okay, so in interpreting these test batteries, a child can be relatively high or relatively low in an area in one of two ways. They can be relatively high or low compared to children in their own age group. To say the middle of the average range is between 90 and 109. So a child could have a 60. So that would be relative to her norm, she's very low. It can also be relatively low or high compared to yourself. So in Maya's case, her highest score minus her lowest score was 37 points. Even her lowest score, if you look further in the report, even her lowest score was down in the 90s somewhere, 85 to 90. So her relative weaknesses were in relation to her own strengths and only marginally low relative to the norms for her peers.
I'm now on the fourth full paragraph on the page. Seems that it's one continuous sentence, so let me start halfway through. Her obtained full scale IQ of 109, uppermost point of the above average range, should be cautiously interpreted as representing a likely underestimate of her true or potential functioning that should occur.
109? No way is her. No way. I'm sorry. I'm only medium smart. My IQ is like in the 125, 26-ish range. And that's medium smart. She's not 109. 109. She's the top functioning student. She's the top student in her class, number one. Her IQ has got to be up there, like 150 something, not 109. Where did he get this?
Her after she has a continuous period of non-narcotic, non-opioid medication, no return to the dissociative.
Let's go back.
After she's range should be cautiously interpreted as representing a likely underestimate of her true or potential functioning that should occur after she has a continuous period of non-narcotic, non-opioid medication, and no return to the dissociative anesthesia medications that she was prescribed in the past in Tampa and Mexico. Which drugs were you concerned with when you wrote that?
Okay, so what this true IQ means, so I'm testing a child who was giving various types of medications. They can affect how a child's functioning. In her clinical interview, she also described to me that she had the subjective experience of processing problems with memory. And she told me on her own that she heard the doctors and her mom talking about that ketamine can affect her memory. So what this part of the report says, if this child were retested at a point where she had less invasive medications, her psychological issues are treated, it's very possible that her full-scale IQ would be higher than what I obtained.
And which medications were you concerned about?
Really all of them and the interaction between all of them.
And when you say all of them, what medications?
The ones that I mentioned there. I know ketamine itself can affect memory. The opioid and benzodiazepines all have central nervous system side effects. They can affect psychomotor speed, graphomotor speed, processing speed.
How long will the effects of those drugs linger?
They all have different half-lives, and it depends on how much they're, so how long a drug, as you put it, would linger, depends on how much you're giving over what period of time.
Did you attribute her relative processing speed deficit to the drugs that she'd been on?
Not by itself. So further in the report, I say that in several places. Some of these relatively low scores could be the medication itself, or it could be the psychological distress that she's having, that those can also affect the scores on these tests.
You mentioned a second ago that there could be other causes for the processing speed relative deficit. And I think you threw out a broad category of psychological pain.
Well, anxiety and depression associated with psychological pain can cause those things to be low. Lots of kids that I see that have PTSD, for instance, have had traumas, that some of those scores are relatively low.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a second ago you testified, you had no way on October 18, 2016 of separating out the lingering effects of ketamine and the other drugs versus the psychological pain aspect of things that were affecting her processing speed.
Right.
So that psychological pain, that would include potentially, would that include pain from CRPS?
No, that's physical pain.
Okay.
So when I interviewed Maya, she described that she was worried about what she perceived as her mother's distress. She's also traumatized by hearing, or what she believed that she heard, that she had a 50-50 chance of dying as a result of some of these treatments. She also felt really badly about hearing how much money her parents were spending. All three of those things were causing her worry or depression.
Okay. You've mentioned several times today that she overheard this conversation about the risk of her dying from the ketamine treatment. Have you become aware at any point that her statement is that she was directly told about the risk of dying?
It's what is in the report at the top of page 7. She said, I heard him. And I believe at that point, she referred to the doctor in Mexico. I heard him telling my mother that her mother, had to sign papers because the infusions had a 50% chance of killing me. Those are Maya's exact words to me.
I understand that your takeaway from the conversation was that she overheard that from Dr. Cantu.
It wasn't a takeaway. She said, I heard him telling my mother.
I can't testify to exactly which was the last day she saw the mother. All I know is that no contact order was entered on October 14th,
right,
and your evaluation took place on October 18th. So 4 days of separation at a minimum. How would that affect a child's emotional status?
I've never seen that happen, where a child hadn't talked to a parent for several days, and that by itself was causing a child such significant psychological distress that it would affect their testing. Lots of the kids that I see, for whatever reasons, don't see their parents. One travels out of town, one got put in the hospital for whatever reason. You know, it happens all the time that kids have days at a time where they don't see or talk to one of their parents. I've never found that to be something that would cause effects on their testing.
Would hearing that news comprise significant psychological pain such that her processing speed could slow down?
I can tell you this. I carefully interviewed this child. She never once brought up to me, and I was sitting there with her, and she brought up lots of things to me about her mom, including this worry that her mom's depression was related to, what she perceived as her mom's depression was related to her being abused by her father. This child never once, and she had many, I said, do you want to ask me anything? And many times I said, do you want to ask me anything? And I would ask her questions. At no time did she say, when exactly am I going to get to see my mom again? She never brought up to me that she wasn't seeing her mom or when she was going to see her at any point. It never came up.
I don't believe him. I don't believe these
so
people.
If it was bothering her, she never mentioned it. She did tell me lots of other things that were bothering her, but that wasn't one of them.
Did you find Maya to be depressed?
Yes.
And when you said it needs to be shared with a consulting pediatric neurologist, who did you have in mind?
I didn't have anybody in mind. I was recommending in more than one place in my report. I felt that a neurologist could do, an independent neurologist with no financial stake in her case, that wasn't going to make money from giving her pain management drugs, could render more independent opinions about the course of treatment, what's going to be best for her, what took place before before I saw her, what's the best course for the future.
And are you aware if a consulting pediatric neurologist at Johns Hopkins ever carried out this task?
I wasn't saying that had to be done at Johns Hopkins. I didn't know when the child was going to be out of the hospital. I didn't know if it was something that the family could do.
The important point was that they didn't have a financial, this neurologist would not have a financial stake in the case. Is that correct?
Well, in that they wouldn't.
I'm sorry. Did he just say he didn't know when that evaluation could be done? Maybe because he didn't know when she'd be out of the hospital, when his entire job was to make sure she didn't leave the hospital because he works for DCF. He works for DCF. He's on the side of the caseworkers. He's not an objective third party. He's part of the system. And I understand from the chat that he died recently. Sorry to hear that, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm not sorry. Not sorry that one more of these people is no longer there to terrorize kids and take them away from their families. I can't really feel very much sorrow for that. And that's the way I feel.
The same doctor who would be diagnosing this or not diagnosing it or making the treatment plan wouldn't also be making $10,000 a pop to give her ketamine infusions.
And without reviewing these reports of Dr. Chopra and Dr. Duncan, you're not aware as to the ultimate opinion of a consulting pediatric neurologist?
I mean, my opinion was that, so to use it in a different language, at the very beginning of inception of treatment by the two treating docs, Dr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Hanna, that there should have been a multidisciplinary approach to this case before the inception of treatment. And I would still recommend that now.
Did you ever discuss this with Dr. Smith following your evaluation?
I already told you I never talked to Dr. Smith about this case.
Am I correct in concluding from your testimony today that you've never discussed your evaluation of Maya with anyone from All Children's Hospital?
Right.
This concludes the deposition of Dr. Jim Lewis, PhD.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members of the jury. There we go. Put the lights back on. That is going to conclude the jury's involvement today. So that means you're going to go home in a couple of minutes. I just want to let you know we are still
we have a half
on
hour.
track. So just kind of give you a heads up. We are still on track and to finish by whatever I said, the 8th or the 9th.
This is when all the fireworks begin. Sally, there's a separate stream for locals. I posted it already on locals. So you're going to go to locals for the movie stream at 9 p.m. or, you know, if I go a little long here, I'll be there shortly. So that's going to be, we're going to be watching Take Care of Maya on Netflix together, locals only, at 9 o'clock.
All 321s.
Or thereabouts.
And so I would like to do those first and take as much time as we need to do those.
And then there are 4 that I think go faster, which are the 2 negligent infliction of emotional distress and the 2 fraud counts. And so I'd like to do those and then kind of follow through the outline then, because medical malpractice, which is short, but Sally Smith, I want to see if I can get that Dr. Smith under control and count 14 rolls with that. And at that point, I would jump back to the very beginning to battery and false imprisonment, because that also deals with the punitive damages part.
So we're done around.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, are we ready to start?
If you don't mind, I'll do it from the podium. I've been sick for 2 weeks.
That's fine. You've been sitting in the uncomfortable chairs too.
Yes, sir, I have. So the first 2 motions are going to be the motions for directed verdict on the claims of the estate of Beata Kowalski for intentional infliction of emotional stress, counts 21A and.
All right, hold on. So we understand. I'm going to slow this back down to normal speed. He is moving for a directed verdict on certain counts, which means he wants the judge to rule in their favor and kick out some counts against the hospital. And from my perspective, what I saw, this did not go very well for the plaintiff.
21B, it's a survival count and a wrongful death count based on intentional infliction. I want to address these first because, as I say, I think in terms of getting things right in this trial, these are the most important counts. I think you already know the standard applied to a directed verdict, and I won't repeat that unless your memory has failed you. But I would point out that, as we've discussed before under Baker versus Florida National Bank and in several other cases, there's an emphasis that this is a little bit different because the question of whether something arises to the level of intentional infliction of emotional distress is regarded as a legal question rather than a factual. And that's because there are a lot of policy reasons why there should be kind of a gatekeeper on this before it goes to a jury.
I think I was kind of alluding to that this morning.
Yes. And of course, that can be done on a motion to dismiss, but it can also be done on a motion for a directed verdict. And I'm not going to discuss the case law with you because I think we've plowed this a lot, but I will emphasize that the standard for directed verdict is discussed in Kim versus Chang, which is 249 Southern 3rd, 1300. It's a 2nd District Court reversing a trial court that failed to grant a directed verdict. And you've already discussed even out loud during trial here, the Liberty Mutual versus Stedman case from 2007, which is the one where they said it stood for a situation where an insurance company declined to authorize a double lung transplant even after ordered to do so. And the same year was the Galagui versus Rodriguez case, which is 970 Southern 2nd 470, which is the case where the 2nd District indicated they were assuming the truth of the facts in the complaint, but the complaint alleged that police officers were intentionally running an organized drug or out of someone's bar and threatening the bar owner. So the elements of this are basically threefold. You have to have an intentional or reckless conduct, and that conduct must be extreme and outrageous conduct, which is behavior that under the circumstances goes beyond all possible bounds of decency and is regarded as shocking, atrocious, and utterly intolerable in a civilized society.
The reason he is asking for the directed verdict on this is because a judge is going to only rule on what the law says. A judge is not going to let emotion get in the way of his ruling. The jury, on the other hand, doesn't have that limitation. A jury gets to decide what they think. So he is trying to get rid of the outrageous conduct. And based on what he finds in the law, I hate to tell you, I don't think it's going to go well for the plaintiff. The judge takes it under advisement, which means he's going to rule on it later. But the guy that they have on the plaintiff's side arguing plaintiff's case is like completely, he appears to me to be completely unprepared. And he, as you can see, Alton Byrne has his arguments down. He is ready to go. This is the former appellate judge. He knows what these arguments are. And the plaintiff's case does not, this appears to have taken them by surprise, which I'm shocked at. I'm really shocked at, because the way they argue it is not good. And I think the judge saying he's going to take it under advisement is giving him some time to figure out, how do I not rule on this? And I don't like it. I think this is really slippery.
Civilized community. and that conduct must cause the victim severe emotional distress. To be severe, that stress must have such intensity or duration that no ordinary person should be expected to endure it. It's a reasonable person standard, not a specific person standard.
Now, if that's where it stopped, I would say that she has it in the bag. No reasonable person should be expected to survive or put up with the trauma that comes from your mother being driven to suicide by a hospital, by being taken false imprisonment, removed from your family. All of these things we can say without a doubt meets that standard. But wait, he's not done. The law is not done. And the law, oh, this is not good.
And the causation here is a but-for causation, that the extreme and outrageous conduct is a legal cause of emotional stress if it directly and in natural continuous sequence produces or contributes substantially to such severe emotional distress so that it can be reasonably said that but for the extreme and outrageous conduct, the severe emotional distress would not have occurred. Now for count 21B, we know we haven't quite landed on the exact language, but there's a next step, and that the extreme and emotional distress must be such that it is a legal cause of suicide. We've discussed the substantial factor test and the irresistible impulse test, but at this point, I don't think you've committed yourself to exactly how we're going to use that test. At the beginning of this, what I want to point out for both of these is that if you analyze the evidence that's actually come in as compared to what was pled as to Beata Kowalski and her relationship directly with the hospital, I don't think that any of the standard elements have been established in this case. The evidence on this is actually quite limited because it didn't start at the end of communism in Poland, whatever year that was. It begins on October 7th, 2016. And that's when Maya Kowalski arrives in the hospital with her father, Jack Kowalski. And the testimony concerning that first week of the event is almost exclusively from Jack Kowalski. There may be a little bit from Maya Kowalski, but she was 10 years old and needing to be in an ICU unit at that time. So there's not too much testimony from her.
Oh.
So we don't have any testimony.
But then she was 10 and she was locked up in a hospital, so we don't need to hear from her.
Testimony that's been presented by a doctor that's employed by the hospital or any other witness. We have no third-party witnesses to what went on in that third week. And so Mr. Kowalski says that he took Maya to the hospital on Friday morning about 8 o'clock. And they were there because they had been in Pinellas County already to see Dr. Hannah, who we know had given her the ketamine treatments for 2 days preceding that at high dosage. And Beata Kowalski arrives at the hospital sometime soon thereafter. And it's pretty clear that she sort of takes the role of principal parent to discuss these things with the hospital.
She was the nurse.
Maya was in pain and thrashing about, and Beata was upset. And Beata wanted ketamine treatment to be continued at the ER or in the pediatric intensive care unit. The hospital didn't want to do that. And as a result, Beata eventually wanted to take the child out of the hospital with the theory that she was going to see Dr. Hannah. Now, Dr. Hannah hasn't testified in this case at all. We've got his medical records in, but that's all we have here. We know that there was apparently an appointment scheduled to see him, but there's absolutely no testimony that he would actually have been willing to give this child ketamine, even if the child had been taken out of the pediatric intensive care unit and taken to him. Now,
he breathes like it too.
At that point,
he may be having
when Beata wants to take her home, the testimony right now is that someone in the hospital threatened to arrest them and they changed their mind. Now, and of course you have ruled, and I won't go through the rest of this, that at that point in time, everything the hospital did in terms of reporting this to DCF was done in good faith. And in that process, you know that the hospital contacted Sally Smith, who had a background in medical child abuse and was the head of the CPT team in Pinellas County, and also happened to be a member with staff privileges at the hospital to get advice about child abuse. Not that first day, it wasn't so much to be treatment, but whether what we're seeing is medical child abuse. At that point in time, or within a day of that point in time, she is assigned the duties to investigate this for the CPT team. And at that point, she comes to the hospital for an interview with them. And within a day, the shelter proceeding is filed and there's a hearing in court. Now, whether there was medical negligence that took place in that time period, or maybe a false imprisonment of Maya under this, assuming that that was sufficient for false imprisonment, the question is whether the things these doctors did in that time period goes beyond the bounds of decency and regarding as shocking, atrocious, and utterly intolerable in the civilized community.
That
And respectfully,
explains
I
it pretty
think
good.
doing anything but what they did would have had moral issues more than what they actually did. To that point in time, I don't think there's a single act that they can look at, or even a collection of acts, and say, this fits within intentional conduct or reckless conduct that in some fashion causes severe emotional distress because it's extreme and outrageous conduct. I just don't think it's there at all. Now, after the hearing, Beata is no longer in the hospital. She's at home, or at least she's away from the hospital. From that point in time, there is the testimony on this is, of course, that she never experienced extreme or outrageous conduct in the hospital itself. There's nothing direct one-on-one except for the contact with Kathy Beatty that allegedly, or by the evidence, takes place on these telephone calls. So we know it doesn't happen in the hospital on a one-on-one basis. The only testimony about her stress during this period comes from Mr. Kowalski. He said it again today. Basically, he'd come to the hospital, which he did on a regular basis, and he'd go back home, and apparently either by cell phone in the car or when he got home, he'd tell his wife what he learned. Now, he doesn't say that he did it in a fashion that caused extreme distress. I'm sure, as he said, it was upsetting to her, but upsetting isn't the test we need for this tort. And so, I mean, I think we have to presume, and I think the evidence supports, that Mr. Kowalski didn't do things to make her extremely upset in that situation. And I certainly don't blame him for having done it in the fashion that he did. But what we do know in this time period between the 13th of October and when she commits suicide, that she did not see a doctor or a priest who testified that she was in this kind of severe distress. No doctor or priest told the hospital about any distress or told a jury anything about this. She only saw Dr. Duncan, and that was for forensic testimony that was ordered by the judge in the shelter proceeding. And Dr. Duncan was up here. She testified that the hospital was reasonably cooperative with her letting her interview Maya in the hospital, that she talked.
Hold on. Well, I was going to say something, went right out of my head, so we'll just let him continue.
To Beata, and that she was reasonably cooperative with her letting her interview Maya in the hospital, that she talked to Beata, and that she saw no signs of extreme stress or suicidal ideations herself.
Okay, I remember. So I think what's going to hurt the plaintiff in this, for all of them, is he gets to another argument where the law says that the extreme distress or whatever has to actually result in physical harm. And the only physical harm that the plaintiff can point to is the rewiring of the brain in PTSD. But the defense will tell them, you didn't call anybody to testify to that, and there's no evidence that we know about that's even real because you didn't call anybody. And how come none of them have gotten any therapy for that in the last 5 years? If that's true, that was a huge mistake by the plaintiffs. Why haven't they been in counseling for PTSD? They clearly need it. I believe they have it. And I think it was a big mistake of the plaintiff not to have them all get into regular counseling for PTSD. Yeah, but Night Owl, we know she has PTSD and it harmed her, but they didn't seek any other outside, like she's not going to, oh, I know why. Oh, she's not going to PTSD therapy because they could subpoena all the records. So until the trial is over, she can't have any privacy. And neither can Jack and neither can Kyle. They can subpoena all of those records. But the plaintiff in his argument doesn't bring it up. They don't bring that up.
She had no friends or neighbors that told this jury that she came to them saying that she was terribly, terribly upset. And Mr. Kowalski did not come back to the hospital and tell them that she was in extreme emotional distress and that they had to somehow do something to get her treatment care or do something that they could do from where they were compared to where she was, since she couldn't enter the hospital. So during that time period, if you look at the conduct with her, the notion that there's intentional or reckless conduct by the hospital that causes stress, to the point of whether it causes stress, the evidence is not there. We know that Beata Kowalski did not view the videotape from the EEG room, although she certainly was aware of it, at least from the point in time when her lawyer obtained it from the hospital. And it's undisputed that she did not hear or see the photographs that were taken on the day before, apparently before she committed suicide. So while that may be a factor as to Maya, it's not
She knew about them.
Something that plays a role in trying to decide whether the hospital is guilty of intentional conduct or reckless conduct against Beata. Now, the supervised telephone calls clearly upset her. Now, it's clear from the testimony that at least somebody from DCF was on those phone calls as well. So the fact that there are people listening in is maybe an invasion of privacy, but that's not been alleged in any count ever in this complaint. And the notion that they're using Miss Beatty's phone and that this is taking place, the phone call itself or her position certainly is not outrageous conduct. You've listened to the phone calls where they say that she was interrupted by Miss Beatty. It could be rude, it could be impolite. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but there's lots of cases that say that being rude and impolite and those kinds of things is generally not something that rises to the level of extreme and emotional distress. So I do not think those phone calls by themselves or in combination with what we're seeing here are enough to rise to that level. Now, in the final week,
And we're talking about, I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yep.
Your argument is to count 21A and B, the survival action and wrongful death relating to Beata, and we're not talking about.
that's right. We'll move over and talk about that one later. And to a certain degree, I'll point out that, well, even if you look at that as well, indirect as to her, there's a lot of things there that go on that may not be pleasant, but whether they arise to this standard is perhaps another question. But right now, I'm just looking at Miss Beatty, with Miss Kowalski directly, because I think under the law, and when you look at all the other cases, it's always been direct conduct and not something that is a game of telephone where he said that causes stress. So under this theory, I think it has to be direct and intentional or reckless. Now, in that final week, there really isn't much evidence at all of anything that she knew about or contact that she had that upset her from the hospital. What we do know is that on Friday, she goes to a court hearing. That's the hearing where the judge is giving her an opportunity to prove that she didn't, not to prove, but to have the DCF have the burden by preponderance of the evidence at that level to prove that she was guilty of medical child abuse. It's going to happen, I think, 4 weeks later. She wants to hug her child. Her lawyer requests that. The judge says no. And she goes home and within a very short period of time writes 2 suicide notes that I believe have been put into evidence. I think they were up on the screen if I recall correctly. And those notes are to the judge, not to the hospital. Admittedly, they complain about some people at the hospital, but the person she's directing them to is the judge. And then she leaves home for a while. Whether she had a gun with her or not, Mr. Kowalski thought she did. He reported this to the police, but he didn't try to Baker act her. He didn't try to get any help for her from a counselor of any sort at that point in time. He said he thought she was depressed, but he didn't think she was suicidal. And he was there. And then the next morning they get up, and the testimony is that she wraps a birthday present for someone that they're going to a party, I think still in the same community. And everybody else in the family leaves her home and they go to that party. Now, I don't think they would have left her home if they thought that she appeared to them to be suicidal at that point in time. And when they come back, they don't see her and they don't look for her in the house. Presumably she's already hung herself or choked herself rather in the garage, but I suppose it's at least theoretically possible that she was away from home and came back later that evening and did the same. And I don't want to dwell on the detail of the suicide, but it was not a spontaneous act. It took a fair amount of planning to do it the way it was done. It was a choking, not a hanging. Her toes are actually on the ground in the pictures at the end when it's investigated. So it doesn't look like something that was done impulsive by someone who simply picks up a gun and pulls the trigger or takes a knife and slits their throat. This is to the extent that suicides are reasoned out, this is a reasoned out suicide. Now, all of this is simply not a prima facie showing of an intentional or deliberate or reckless conduct that is directed at Beata. And assuming that it is, whether you look at these in individual or you try to, you can't simply add up a dozen things that don't meet the standard at all, or especially things that are negligent or rude and transform them into a period of intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Mr. Elmer, let me ask you this. Do you have a case law or can you point to case law that talks about the conduct has to be direct versus indirect for intentional infliction of emotional distress?
I don't know that I have a case that expressly addresses that, but when you look at the cases where they say it is enough over and over and over again, it's, we refuse to give you a lung transplant. We hung out in your bar and pretended we were running, or we did run a drug ring. We do things quite directly to you. Certainly in the initial case, they refused to give insurance coverage to something, although in the original case in this, it was found not to be sufficient to be intentional infliction of emotional distress. So all I can say is from the cases that I've given you from around the country on suicide and on these, the ones that rise to this level are in order, and I think it's because you have to intentionally want to do this or recklessly do it under the standard of, you know that there's a high probability you're going to cause harm to this person. And that's very hard to do on some indirect fashion when they haven't been inside your hospital for about 90 days at the time of these events. Now, the causation problem in this case, if I can go on to the issue of causation, is also a difficult one because of what you've been struggling with for 2 weeks with Chapter 39. Everybody knows that that this woman was very upset and understandably upset because her child is in the hospital and she can't see her. And the government has taken this person, her child, away from her for more than 3 days. 3 months. It's going to be another period of time until she has a final hearing. And yeah, she's very upset about that. And as the doctor on the stand this morning said, things that happened in the 24 or 72 hours before suicide are critical. And what happened to things in the court. Over and over again, we're seeing that the thing that seems to be the strongest cause here are things that have been ordered under the control of the court and not under the control of the hospital. So the fact that Maya on the stand the other day, I want it out. Frankly, the hospital was wanting to transfer her early on to someplace that had a unit that could care for this problem better than they could. And unfortunately, that simply didn't happen. We've heard a lot through this that was told to the jury about they did this and they did that in connection to this claim and others. But so often that they is a combination of either the hospital and DCF, or sometimes it was only DCF. So my position is that neither one of these claims reaches the level to be an intentional infliction of emotional distress. You jump to suicide, you've got that next layer of things. And again, what you heard this morning, irresistible impulse and substantial factor, by the way, aren't really terms that are psychiatric. They're legal. And I would submit to you that in this circumstance, when you think about this tort, it's a but-for causation and ought to be the substantial factor as compared to a substantial factor. And when you start looking at this, the substantial factor for a suicide a day after the court hearing, after 100 days of court, was the court and not anything that was done that may have been rude, impolite, or medical negligence, or more than that in the hospital. So I believe we're entitled to a directed verdict on both of those. If you want me to, I'll stop now, or I can go on to Maya.
I'm going to have you stop, but I want to, unless they push back, but I want to clarify because I don't think it changes your argument.
Okay.
But I think you said that I had found the report, the abuse hotline report, to be done in good faith. I think what I had found was that there was a reasonable cause for the report, and under the existing case law, I did not have to get to the issue of whether it was done in good faith. I think my statements in the order that we were talking about was that I questioned whether the cases that I have to, and I'm legally bound to apply, whether they were wrong. And I think they were wrong on the question of good faith, because I think this, because the statute said good faith twice, but because Judge Padovano in that first DCA case had said what he said, I did not go there because I'm bound by that. So I don't think that changes your arguments, but I wanted to make sure that that didn't, because.
And you are exactly correct in what that order says. I would submit to you that evidence also established good faith, but I know that you didn't reach that. You reached what you thought the law required under the cases from the first district. So I didn't mean to misstate that.
No. And I wanted to make sure that it didn't change your argument.
Nope.
And I didn't think it would. I just wanted to make sure. Is it going to be Ms. Ferrier or Mr. Elliott? Who's going to make the argument? And you're welcome to stand if you want to keep standing, or if you want to go back and sit, that's fine. Whatever you want to do.
Sitting for so long.
This guy, I don't
Thank you,
like
Your
his
Honor. Tom Elliott here with my
arguments.
partner, Amy Ferrier.
His last name is Elliott or Ellicott? Not sure.
Let me start toward near the end, because one of the things I heard toward the end was, it seems to be. It seems to be means that's a jury question. We're here on a directed verdict. No questions, nothing for the jury to decide. And when I start hearing, it seems to be these other things were the major cause, that's their call. That's their call. Now, suicide, we've been kind of working backwards. Your Honor's already ruled. I've seen the transcript. We had the argument. You announced that the question would be, did John Hopkins cause Beata Kowalski to act on an irresistible impulse resulting in her death, or was John Hopkins' conduct a substantial factor in the death? And that is consistent with the standard jury instruction for the issues that will come before the court for the jury. Legal cause, you heard the first legal cause, A, read, it's 410.6, but B is concurring cause. And it only needs to be extreme outrageous conduct may be a legal cause of severe emotional distress, even though it operates in combination with other causes, if extreme and outrageous conduct contributes substantially to producing such severe emotional distress. Contributes. Their call.
Well, let me just, because I think for an intentional infliction of emotional distress, it's a little bit different, at least with respect to the question of outrage. Because, I mean, under Stedman, that says that it's an issue of law. So I think that's squarely before me here.
I'm working backwards.
I have it on 1.5
Yes, Sean.
speed. Let's see how he is on normal speed, just to look at how his demeanor is. I sped it up because they talk so slow. Look he's lost already, and he's like super nervous.
To go to the question of direct, there is nothing in the instruction, standard instruction, or I think you heard admitted in the case law, that says it has to be directed to Beata Kowalski. The claim refers to acting extremely and outrageously that caused her severe emotional distress. Under the hospital's theory, you could have someone take and beat their child in front of them, and it's not directed to the parent, so the parent has no emotional distress. That's not severe and outrageous to the parent. We've heard, and I was here to hear part of this morning, Beata Kowalski heard of everything that was going on. She heard some on the phone. She heard some directly. She witnessed some the first week. This reference to they could have been transferred. It's my understanding that that transfer would have required Beata Kowalski to admit, in effect, that she had this disease, that the parent had this disease they were accusing her of, and not that it was CRPS. So, that's not really a get out of jail free card, if you will. That's just one of.
This dude is making me feel uncomfortable. He's so uncomfortable. He's he's so nervous. And I'm sure it's really nerve-wracking to be in front of all these cameras and you're being broadcasted across the world and people like me are judging you. I get it. I get it. And I'm sure he's a very good lawyer. So far, so good. I mean, he's making good points here. It gets worse later. But it's time for the movie. And I promised that we would do it. And I'm a little bit late already. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to watch the movie. And then with my peeps on Locals, and if you want to join us on Locals, it's meganfox.locals.com. You can use promo code Maya and get a free month when you sign up monthly. And hey, if you sign up for a month and you don't like it, well, cancel, But tonight we're watching Take Care of Maya as soon as I close out of here. And then what I think I'm going to do, because I do want to finish this up, I think we'll do an ASMR Betty by time stream where I will take my laptop into bed. I will close out my camera and we'll listen to the rest of this while I talk to you softly. and I'll try not to wake you up if you're falling asleep. We'll just do a whisper stream. Corn Puff, you signed up today? Oh, that's awesome. So if you guys want to hear the rest of this, just come and watch the movie first, and then we'll come right back and we'll do the rest of this, because there's like 2 hours left. We can do 2 hours. All right, so it's going to take me a few minutes to get the RMTP set up in StreamYard, but then I will be there and we will start the Netflix documentary, Take Care of Maya. I really can't wait for this. I think we should get our jammies on. Yeah, get your jammies on. I got some new jammies today. So I'm going to go put on my new jammies and I'm going to get in there with you guys and we're going to watch this. And then we'll come back and we'll watch the rest of this in a Betty by ASMR stream. How about that? Okay. All right, you guys. Go sign up on Locals and I will be back. Oh, and don't forget, you can always go to the merch store too if you like this channel and you want a sweatshirt or something. We've got a lot of fun ones. I've got For Fox's Sake. We've got the Sorry for Having Great Tits and Correct Opinions on Everything mug. That also comes in t-shirts, etc. That's always a fun one. So head over to the merch store. The links are in the description. I'll see you guys over on Locals. meganfox.locals.com. Don't disappoint me. I expect to see you all there. All right. I'm out.
Lost, my world is near its end. I almost felt my head is full of a million choices. I am alive, I'm not here to pretend. I love my friends, my heart is filled with a million voices. Oh, this road has many choices. Oh, and my heart, million voices. Come next to me, my friend, embrace the sky. I'm not afraid to fly. It's not the time to say goodbye. Say goodbye. No, I don't wanna stay. pretend. I love my friends, my heart is filled with a million voices. Oh, this road has many choices, and my heart, million voices. Come next to me, my friend, embrace the sky. I'm not afraid to fly. It's not the time to say goodbye.